The bakery district of Meadowvale smelled like heaven. Warm bread, sweet pastries, and roasted coffee beans filled the morning air as vendors opened their stalls. Children ran between the shops while their parents haggled over prices. Nobody noticed the shadow that fell across the marketplace until the screaming started. Arcturus descended from the sky like a falling mountain. His obsidian scales caught the sunlight, sending golden reflections dancing across the cobblestones. Each wing beat sent dust and debris swirling through the market square. When his claws touched the ground, the impact cracked the stone beneath him. He stood 3 stories tall, ancient and terrible, with eyes that burned like dying stars. The marketplace emptied in seconds. Vendors abandoned their stalls. Customers dropped their purchases and ran. Even the brave ones who had faced pirates and raiders took one look at the Dragon King and fled. Within moments, the bustling square became a ghost town. All except one stall. Walter continued arranging croissants in neat rows. His weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, placing each pastry just so. Flour dusted his gray hair and simple apron. He hummed an old tune while he worked, completely ignoring the massive predator walking toward him. Arcturus stopped 10 feet from the bakery stall. His nostrils flared, tasting the air. This human should be terrified. Every other species in the galaxy cowered before him. 73 worlds had surrendered at the mere sight of his fleet. 42 civilizations now served him as slaves. Yet this tiny, fragile creature continued arranging bread like nothing unusual had happened. "You block my morning sun," Walter said without looking up. "The croissants need to stay warm." The Dragon King blinked. In 3,000 years, no one had spoken to him with such casual disregard. Emperors groveled. Warriors begged for mercy. Even the Galactic Council treated him with fearful respect. But this old human acted like Arcturus was nothing more than an inconsiderate neighbor. "Do you know who I am?" Arcturus growled. His voice rumbled like an earthquake. "I know you're in my light." Walter finally glanced up. His blue eyes showed no fear, only mild annoyance. "Are you buying something or just window shopping?" Arcturus felt his anger rise. He unfurled his wings to their full span, blocking out the sun entirely. His shadow covered the entire square. "I am Arcturus, Dragon King of the Eternal Flame, conqueror of 73 worlds, master of—" "That's nice," Walter interrupted. "But I asked if you're buying anything." The Dragon King stood speechless. This had never happened before. Ever. He had prepared speeches, demonstrations of power, threats that would break the human spirit. None of it mattered because this baker simply did not care about any of it. "I have tasted delicacies from 1,000 worlds," Arcturus said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "I have eaten fruits that grant visions and meats that extend life. What could you possibly offer me?" Walter shrugged and picked up a honey bun from the display. Steam still rose from its golden surface. He wrapped it in simple brown paper and set it on the counter. "This is fresh, still warm. Made it 20 minutes ago. I do not eat peasant food. Suit yourself." Walter turned back to his work. "But it'll be here if you change your mind." Arcturus stared at the wrapped pastry. The human had dismissed him, like he was nothing. The Dragon King felt something he had not experienced in centuries: confusion. He did not know how to respond to someone who refused to acknowledge his power. A small alien child, no taller than Arcturus's knee, wandered into the square. The child had 6 arms and purple skin. It walked right up to Arcturus and grabbed his tail with 2 tiny hands. "Pretty," the child squeaked. The child's mother rushed over, her multiple arms waving in panic. "I'm so sorry, Great One. Please forgive my daughter. She doesn't understand. It's fine," Walter called from his stall. He chuckled softly. Everyone's curious about new visitors. No harm done. Arcturus looked down at the child still clinging to his tail. She smiled up at him with innocent joy. When was the last time someone had approached him without fear? He could not remember. The mother scooped up her daughter and hurried away, apologizing repeatedly. The Dragon King turned back to Walter's stall, but the old baker had already moved on to other tasks. He kneaded dough with strong, steady hands. Hands that had clearly seen hard work. Hands that did not shake with fear. "Why do you not fear me?" Arcturus demanded. Walter paused in his kneading. He looked at Arcturus with those calm blue eyes. "I've seen scarier things than dragons. Impossible. I am the apex predator of the known galaxy." "Maybe." Walter went back to kneading. "But you've never seen a sourdough starter go bad. Now that's terrifying." Arcturus felt his rage building again. This human mocked him, disrespected him, treated him like he was ordinary. The Dragon King should destroy this bakery, burn to ashes, show this insolent creature the cost of disrespect. But something stopped him, some strange curiosity. This Walter was different from any being Arcturus had encountered. He possessed a confidence that did not come from power or weapons. It came from something else, something the Dragon King did not understand. "I will return," Arcturus announced. He spread his wings and prepared to leave. "The honey bun will still be here," Walter said. Arcturus launched himself into the sky, sending another wave of dust across the market. He flew to the governor's mansion on the hill overlooking the city. The human officials there treated him properly. They bowed and scraped and offered him quarters befitting his status. They gave him reports on their military strength, their technology, their defenses. All of it meant to impress him. None of it did. That night, Arcturus stood on the mansion's balcony, looking down at the city. Lights twinkled in windows. He could hear laughter and music drifting on the wind. Somewhere down there, that old baker was probably sleeping, completely unconcerned about the Dragon King's evaluation of his world. Arcturus called for a servant. "Go to the bakery in the market square. There's a wrapped honey bun on the counter. Bring it to me." The servant bowed and scurried away. When he returned with the simple brown package, Arcturus took it with claws meant for tearing apart starships. He unwrapped the pastry carefully. It had gone cold during the hour since Walter made it, but it still smelled sweet. The Dragon King took a small bite. The honey bun was simple, nothing exotic or rare. Just flour, honey, and butter combined with obvious skill. It tasted like comfort, like safety, like something Arcturus had not experienced in so long he had forgotten it existed. He finished the entire pastry standing alone on that balcony, looking down at the sleeping city. Somewhere in that peaceful place, an old baker had treated him like an ordinary customer, had offered him simple kindness without expecting anything in return, had looked at the most feared being in the galaxy and seen nothing worth fearing. Arcturus did not understand it. But for the first time in 3,000 years, he wanted to. 3 days passed like slow torture. Arcturus toured factories where humans built simple machines. He visited farms where they grew basic crops. He inspected their defense systems and found them laughably weak. Everything confirmed what he already knew. These humans were soft, unprepared, vulnerable. Oh, why could he not stop thinking about that bakery? The Galactic Council expected his report. They wanted to know if humanity deserved full civilization status or if they should be restricted to their current system. Arcturus had made such judgments hundreds of times before. It should be easy, quick, obvious. But every night he stood on that balcony, looking down at the market district, wondering what the old baker was doing. On the fourth morning, Arcturus gave up, pretending he did not care. He flew to the marketplace before dawn, landing in the empty square with more care than before. He did not want to crack the stones again. The thought surprised him. When had he started caring about property damage? Warm light glowed from inside Walter's bakery. The old man moved around behind the counter, preparing for the day. Arcturus walked closer and peered through the window. Walter worked with focused concentration, shaping dough into loaves. His movements held a meditation-like quality. Each motion deliberate and practiced. The door opened. Walter stepped out carrying a tray of bread dough. He showed no surprise at finding a 3-story dragon watching him. "You're early," Walter said. "The first batch won't be ready for another hour." "I did not come for bread." "Then why did you come?" Arcturus had no good answer to that question. He settled for demanding, "Why do you wake so early to make food that will be gone by noon?" Walter slid the tray into his outdoor oven and closed the door. He wiped his hands on his apron. Fresh bread makes people happy. Happiness is worth early mornings. Happiness. Arcturus said the word like it tasted strange. What does happiness matter in a brutal universe? Sit with me. Walter gestured to a wooden bench beside his stall. Watch the sun rise while the bread bakes. I do not sit on furniture made for humans. Then stand. I don't care either way. Walter sat down and leaned back against the wall. He closed his eyes, enjoying the cool morning air. Arcturus stood there, uncertain. He could destroy this entire city with a thought. He commanded armies that spanned galaxies. Yet this old baker had somehow taken control of their conversation again. The Dragon King found himself staying, watching the sky lighten from black to deep blue to pink. I lost my wife and daughter 10 years ago, Walter said quietly. His eyes remained closed. Plague took them both within a week. I thought about giving up, thought about joining them. Spent months wishing I had died too. Arcturus said nothing. He did not know why the human was telling him this. Baking saved me, Walter continued. Every morning I got up and made bread, even when I didn't want to, even when it felt pointless. The routine kept me alive until I found reasons to stay alive. What reasons could possibly matter after such loss? Walter opened his eyes and looked at Arcturus. Feeding people, making them smile, being useful. Turns out those things matter more than I thought. Weakness, Arcturus said. Attachment leads to pain. Better to conquer than to care. What have you conquered? Walter asked. 73 worlds. 42 species in servitude. Fleets that know. Walter shook his head. What have you conquered? For yourself. What has all that power brought you? The question hit Arcturus like a physical blow. He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. What had his conquest brought him? Fear from others. Isolation. Empty victories that felt hollow the moment they were won. But he had never admitted that to anyone. Never even admitted it to himself. I have proven my strength, Arcturus said finally. To who? To everyone. But especially to yourself, Walter said softly. You're still trying to prove something. After 3,000 years, you're still trying. Arcturus felt anger rising again, but it mixed with something else. Something that felt dangerously close to shame. You know nothing about me. I know you flew down here at dawn to talk to an old baker. I know you ate a honey bun in secret. I know you're looking for something you haven't found in 73 conquered worlds. Before Arcturus could respond, the first customers began arriving. An elderly woman with kind wrinkles approached the stall. Walter stood and greeted her by name. Morning, Ruth. How's your grandson doing? Much better, thank you. The medicine worked. Walter wrapped up extra pastries and handed them to her. These are for him. Growing boys need good food. Walter, I can't afford, considered a welcome home gift. Walter smiled. Tell him we're glad he's feeling better. Ruth's eyes filled with tears. She hugged Walter and hurried away before she started crying properly. More customers arrived in a steady stream. Walter greeted each one personally. He knew their names, their families, their struggles and joys. He gave extra to those who needed it and accepted less payment from those going through hard times. Arcturus watched this ritual with growing fascination. These are not transactions. They were relationships, connections built over years of small kindnesses. The old baker had created a community around his simple stall. Help me for an hour, Walter said suddenly. Hand out bread. See what it feels like. I do not serve others. No one's asking you to serve. Just help. There's a difference. Arcturus wanted to refuse. Should refuse. Dragon Kings did not hand out pastries to random civilians. But something in Walter's steady gaze made him stay. Made him want to understand what the old baker saw in this daily routine. Fine, Arcturus growled. 1 hour. Walter showed him how to wrap the bread in paper, how to hand it to customers gently so his claws did not tear the packaging. The first few attempts were disasters. Arcturus crushed a loaf, ripped through 3 bags, nearly dropped a whole tray. But then a small human child approached. She looked up at Arcturus with wide, curious eyes. Are you a dragon? She asked. Yes. That's cool. She held out a coin. Can I have a cinnamon roll? Arcturus carefully selected a roll and wrapped it. He handed it to the child with exaggerated caution. She took it and smiled so brightly it made something twist in his chest. "Thank you, Mr. Dragon." She skipped away, already eating the roll. Arcturus stared after her. When was the last time someone had thanked him? Really thanked him, not out of fear, but out of genuine gratitude? He could not remember. The hour passed quickly. More customers came and went. They treated Arcturus with polite curiosity rather than terror. They asked about his scales, his wings, his home. They shared their own stories without being asked. By the end, Arcturus knew about Ruth's sick grandson, about a young couple planning their wedding, about a student struggling with exams. He knew their names, their lives, their small hopes and fears. When a morning rush ended, Walter poured 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Arcturus, who took it awkwardly in his massive claws. "Tomorrow I'm baking memorial bread," Walter said, "for families who lost people during the early terraforming. It's a service we do every year. You should come. If you want to understand humans, that is." "Why would I want to understand you?" Walter smiled. "Because you're still here. Because you came back. Because some part of you knows there's more to strength than conquest." Arcturus wanted to argue, wanted to insist Walter was wrong. But the coffee was warm, and the morning sun felt pleasant, and somewhere in his ancient heart, he knew the old baker spoke truth. "I will consider it," Arcturus said. "Good enough." Walter raised his cup in a small salute. "Same time tomorrow if you want to help again." Arcturus flew away without answering. But the next morning before dawn, he found himself landing in that square again. Walter was already there, preparing dough, completely unsurprised to see him. The memorial garden sat on a hill overlooking Meadowvale's capital. Trees planted by the first colonists provided shade over stone benches and walking paths. In the center stood a wall carved with 53 names. People who had died building this world, making it safe, turning hostile rock into livable land. Arcturus arrived as the sun climbed toward noon. He had never attended a memorial service before. In his culture, the dead were forgotten. Weakness was eliminated from the gene pool. Those who fell in battle received no honors because they had proven themselves unworthy of remembering. But humans gathered their dead, close even after death. Families filled the garden, dressed in their best clothes. Children ran between the trees while adults talked quietly. Walter stood near the memorial wall, setting out his special bread on long tables. Each loaf bore patterns pressed into the crust. Grain stalks, flowers, stars. "You came," Walter said when he noticed Arcturus standing at the garden's edge. "I said I would consider it, and you considered yes." Walter smiled. "Come on, help me set out the rest of these." Arcturus moved closer, trying to be careful of his size in the crowded space. People made room for him without fear now. Word had spread about the Dragon King helping at the bakery. Some even nodded greetings as he passed. The ceremony began with a woman reading names. 53 people. 53 stories. One by one, family members stood and shared memories. An engineer who died when a terraforming machine exploded. A doctor who gave her life treating a new disease. A teacher who shielded students during a structural collapse. A farmer who drowned saving her animals from flash floods. Arcturus expected sadness, despair. Instead, he heard laughter mixed with tears. The humans celebrated these lives. They shared funny stories and proud moments. They spoke of love and courage and sacrifice with voices that broke but did not collapse. An old recording played on a portable screen. It showed the early colonists working together. They sang while they built. They joked while they planted. They supported each other through impossible challenges. The footage was rough and simple, but the joy in their faces felt genuine. Then Walter was called to speak. The old baker walked to the memorial wall slowly. He placed his hand on 2 names carved in the stone. Helen Chun, Amy Chun, his wife and daughter. "My Helen died trying to save crops during the first blight," Walter said. His voice was steady but quiet. She knew the toxins were dangerous. Knew she might not survive exposure. But the colony needed food, and she said someone had to try. He paused, touching her name gently. "She always said someone had to try." "My daughter, Amy, became a doctor. She was only 23 when the plague hit. Young, brilliant, full of life." Walter's voice cracked slightly. She died treating patients. Never stopped. Even when she got sick herself, she kept working. Said people needed her. Tears rolled down Walter's weathered cheeks, but he kept talking. They taught me that love means serving others, even when it costs everything, even when it hurts. They showed me that the measure of a life isn't how long you live, but how you choose to spend the time you have. The crowd embraced Walter when he finished. Not just one or two people, dozens. They surrounded him with physical touch and whispered comfort. They shared his grief and held his pain together. No one stood alone in their sorrow here. Arcturus felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. In his culture, showing emotion was weakness. Grief was private shame. But these humans wore their hearts openly. They let themselves be vulnerable. Let themselves care deeply, even knowing it would hurt. After the ceremony, Arcturus found himself sitting under an old tree while families scattered to picnic on the grass. Children played nearby, their laughter filling the air. It felt wrong somehow, disrespectful to the dead. Walter approached with 2 cups of water. He handed one to Arcturus and sat down beside him. Why do they celebrate? Arcturus asked. 53 people died. How is that cause for joy? We're not celebrating death, Walter explained. We're celebrating the lives they lived, remembering who they were, making sure their sacrifices meant something. In my culture, the dead are forgotten. Only the strong matter. Then your culture is missing something important. Walter sipped his water. The dead give us purpose. They remind us why we build, why we try, why we keep going even when things get hard. Arcturus watched a family nearby, parents and children sharing food and stories. A grandmother telling tales that made everyone laugh. Simple moments that felt more powerful than any victory speech he had ever given. I cannot remember the names of any who died under my command, Arcturus said suddenly. The admission surprised him. 3,000 years of war, and I do not know a single name. Walter said nothing for a long moment. Then, it's not too late to start remembering. How can I remember 3,000 years of forgotten dead? You can't, but you can remember the next person, and the one after that. You can choose differently from here forward. Arcturus looked at the memorial wall with its carefully carved names. Each one mattered to someone. Each one was loved and missed and celebrated. I almost destroyed your entire civilization the day we met. Did you know that? I suspected. Why did you give me that honey bun? Walter smiled slightly. Because you looked hungry. Not for food. For something else. Something you've been missing for a long time. I have conquered everything. I want for nothing. Except connection. Except purpose. Except someone to see you as more than a weapon. Walter turned to face Arcturus fully. I've spent 10 years learning that carrying hate is like drinking poison and expecting others to die. I almost chose vengeance after losing Helen and Amy. Almost joined groups that wanted to punish everyone responsible. Why did you not? Because Helen once told me that the opposite of death isn't survival. It's love. She said the best way to honor the dead is to live according to their values, not your anger. Walter's eyes grew distant. So I chose to feed people instead of hurting them. Chose to build instead of destroy. It was harder than revenge would have been, but it was right. Arcturus felt something crack inside him. Some wall he had built 3,000 years ago when his clan cast him out for showing mercy. He had spent millennia proving that mercy was weakness, that caring was foolish, that isolation was strength. But this old baker had lost everything and chosen love anyway, had faced pain that would break most beings and used it to become kinder instead of cruel. How did you find the strength? Arcturus asked. I didn't find it. I chose it. Every single day. Some days I failed. Some days I was angry and bitter and hurt. But I kept choosing. Eventually it got easier. Walter stood and gestured for Arcturus to follow. They walked back to the bakery in comfortable silence. The memorial bread was gone, taken by families to share in their homes. The stalls were closing for the afternoon rest period. Behind Walter's shop, Arcturus noticed something he had missed before. A small wall covered in photos and names. Not famous people or historical figures. Just ordinary faces with ordinary names. Friends Walter had lost. customers who had passed away, people who mattered to this one old baker. Below the photos, carved into the wood, they taught me that the opposite of death is not survival, it's love. Walter took a napkin from his pocket and pulled out a pen. He began writing slowly, his handwriting careful and deliberate. When he finished, he folded the napkin and handed it to Arcturus. "Read this when you're alone," Walter said. "Really think about it. Then decide what you want to do next." Arcturus took the napkin carefully. It weighed nothing, but it felt heavy in his claws. "What if I do not like what it says? Then you'll keep doing what you've always done. But at least you'll know there was another choice." That night, in his quarters at the governor's mansion, Arcturus finally unfolded the napkin. The message was simple, written in plain language that somehow cut deeper than any weapon ever had. "You have conquered everything except your own loneliness." What if strength meant building instead of breaking? Arcturus read it again, then again. He read it until the words blurred and his claws trembled. No one had spoken to him with such direct truth in 3,000 years. No one had seen past his power to the emptiness beneath. The Dragon King, conqueror of 73 worlds, master of 42 species, began to weep. He wept for the centuries of isolation, for the lives taken in pointless conquest, for the empire built on fear instead of love, for all the years spent proving a point he could not even remember anymore, that he wept until he had no tears left. Then he sat in the darkness, holding a simple napkin, and wondered if an old baker might teach a dragon how to choose differently. Morning came too soon. Arcturus had not slept. He stood on the balcony watching the city wake, the napkin still clutched in his claws. Somewhere down there, Walter was probably already baking, starting another day of simple kindness, building community one loaf of bread at a time, building instead of breaking. The communicator on the desk chimed with urgent insistence. Arcturus knew who it was before he answered. The Galactic Council appeared on the screen, their 12 faces arranged in stern judgment. "Arcturus," the lead counselor said, "we require your evaluation of humanity. You have been on Meadowvale for over a week. This is highly irregular. I need more time." Silence filled the communication line. The counselors exchanged confused glances. In 3,000 years, Arcturus had never needed more than 3 days to judge a species. Usually he decided within hours. "More time." The counselor's voice sharpened. "You have assessed entire civilizations in less time. What makes these humans so difficult to evaluate? They are complicated. They are weak. We have reviewed their military capacity. Their technology is centuries behind standard. Their defenses could not stop a minor raid. Surely you see they require strict limitations on expansion." Arcturus looked at the napkin in his claws. "Strength is not only measured in weapons." "What did you say?" "I said I need more time." Arcturus disconnected the communication before they could argue. He flew to the market before the sun had fully risen. Walter was there, as expected, preparing dough. The old baker looked up when Arcturus's shadow fell across his stall. "You read it," Walter said. It was not a question. "Yes, and I do not know how to answer it." Arcturus landed carefully, mindful of the cobblestones. "I have spent 3,000 years building an empire, proving my strength, conquering those weaker than myself. Why? Because my clan cast me out for showing mercy. They said kindness was weakness, that survival required cruelty. I spent every year since proving them wrong by becoming the strongest being in the galaxy." Walter kneaded his dough with steady rhythm. "Did it work? I became stronger than any of them, more powerful than my entire clan combined. I could destroy them with a thought now. That's not what I asked. Did it work? Did proving them wrong make you happy?" Arcturus had no answer. He had never asked himself that question. Success was victory. Victory was conquest. Conquest was power. He had never considered whether any of it brought joy. "I cannot remember the last time I was happy," Arcturus admitted. "I cannot remember the last time someone asked about my well-being instead of my orders. I cannot remember the last time I simply sat with someone without demanding their submission. Sounds lonely. It is an empire. Emperors are not meant to have friends." "Why not?" Again, Arcturus had no good answer. Because that was how it had always been? Because power required isolation? Because allowing people close meant vulnerability? All of those reasons felt hollow when spoken aloud. I do not know how to be anything other than what I am, Arcturus said quietly. Walter shaped his dough into a loaf and set it aside to rise. You know what I think? I think you've been carrying hate for 3,000 years. Hate for the clan that rejected you. You've been trying to prove them wrong for so long you forgot what you actually wanted. What I want is irrelevant. I am what I have made myself. That's garbage. Walter's voice was gentle but firm. Every moment is a chance to choose differently. You think you're trapped in being the Dragon King? You're not. That's just a role you've been playing. You can stop anytime. I have conquered 73 worlds. I cannot simply walk away from that. Why not? What's stopping you except your own stubbornness? Arcturus wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons why change was impossible. But Walter's steady gaze stripped away his excuses one by one. The truth was simple and terrible. Nothing was stopping him except fear. Fear of admitting he had wasted 3,000 years. Fear of being wrong. Fear of starting over. I do not know how to start over, Arcturus said. Lucky for you, I do. Walter wiped his hands on his apron. You start small. One choice at a time. One day at a time. You already started by coming back here. By reading that napkin. By admitting you're lonely. That is not enough to erase 3,000 years of conquest. No, but it's enough for today. Tomorrow you make another choice. Then another. Eventually, all those small choices add up to a different life. Arcturus looked around the market. Vendors were setting up their stalls. Early customers browsed the morning offerings. A normal day in a peaceful city. Nothing grand or glorious. Just simple people living simple lives with apparent contentment. Your people seem happy, Arcturus observed. Most of the time. We have problems like anywhere else. But yeah, generally people here are content. How? Your technology is limited. Your military is weak. You could be conquered by any number of hostile species. How can you be content knowing how vulnerable you are? Walter smiled. Because we have each other. Because we build community instead of walls. Because we know that connection is better protection than weapons. You can destroy our ships, but you can't destroy what we've built together. That is naive. The universe is cruel. The universe is neutral. People choose cruelty or kindness. You've chosen cruelty for 3,000 years. How's that working out for you? Arcturus wanted to be angry, but he was too tired, too worn down by centuries of isolation and meaningless victories. What would you have me do? Apologize to the 73 worlds I conquered? Free the 42 species in servitude? Dissolve my empire and become a baker? I'd have you figure out what you actually want, not what you think you should want, not what would prove your clan wrong. What would make you happy? I do not remember what happiness feels like. Then stick around and relearn it. Walter pulled out another napkin and handed it to Arcturus. Here's a simple assignment. Spend 1 week living like a citizen of Meadowvale. Not as the Dragon King. Not as a conqueror. Just as someone who lives here. Help in the bakery. Talk to people. Participate in community life. Then decide what you want to tell the council. Arcturus took the napkin. Why do you care what I do? Because I think you're tired of being angry. I think you want something different, but don't know how to ask for it. I think underneath all that power and fear, there's someone who just wants to belong somewhere. Walter met his eyes. Am I wrong? No, Walter was not wrong. Arcturus had been searching for belonging for 3,000 years. He had looked for it in conquest and found only emptiness. He had sought it in fear and found only isolation. He had tried to build it through power and created only a prison of his own making. 1 week, Arcturus said. 1 week, Walter agreed. Starting now, take off that armor. Arcturus looked down at himself. He wore ceremonial armor etched with scenes of his victories. He had not removed it in decades. It was part of his identity, part of the Dragon King image. Slowly, carefully, he began removing the pieces. Chest plate, shoulder guards, leg armor. Each piece fell away like shedding old skin. Underneath, his scales showed scars from 1,000 battles. Evidence of a long, violent life. Walter handed him a simple apron. This is what we wear for honest work. The apron looked ridiculous on a three-story dragon. Arcturus struggled with the ties until Walter helped him adjust it properly. The fabric felt strange against his scales. Vulnerable. Exposed. There, Walter said. Now you look like someone ready to learn. I look ridiculous. You look approachable. Big difference. Walter gestured to the morning dough. Come on, I'll teach you how to knead bread properly. You crushed the last batch. Arcturus moved to the work table. His claws were meant for tearing metal, not shaping dough. But he tried. He watched Walter's practiced hands and attempted to copy the motion. He failed. The dough stuck to his scales. His claws left deep gouges. Gentler, Walter coached. Bread responds to patience, not force. Arcturus tried again and again. Slowly, clumsily, he began to feel the rhythm Walter showed him. Push and fold, turn and press. The dough started to smooth out under his careful attention. Better, Walter said. You're learning. For the first time in 3,000 years, those words made Arcturus feel proud. Not because he had conquered something, but because he had created something simple and good that would feed people and make them happy that he spent the rest of the morning learning to bake. He burned 2 loaves and dropped 3 more. But by noon, he had made 1 acceptable loaf of bread. Walter placed it in the display with the others that a young girl bought it an hour later. She smiled at Arcturus and said thank you. The Dragon King, conqueror of 73 worlds, felt his heart swell with unfamiliar joy. 0.7 days passed like a dream. Arcturus woke before dawn each morning and flew to the bakery. He wore his simple apron instead of his armor. He learned the names of regular customers. He discovered that Mrs. Patterson liked her bread sliced thick and Mr. Kim preferred his rolls extra crispy on the second day. A teenager taught him a clapping game while they waited for bread to rise. Arcturus fumbled with the rhythm at first, his massive claws struggling with the quick patterns. But the teenager laughed with him, not at him, and kept teaching until Arcturus got it right. On the 3rd day, an elderly woman named Dorothy shared her soup recipe. She insisted Arcturus write it down, saying every baker needed to know good soup. He had conquered civilizations, but he carefully copied her handwriting onto a card he kept in his apron pocket. On the 4th day, a young couple asked his advice about an argument. They were planning their wedding and could not agree on the location. Arcturus listened to both sides and suggested they choose a place meaningful to their relationship rather than what looked impressive. They hugged him when they left, their argument forgotten in favor of remembering their first date location. On the 5th day, children drew pictures of him, not as the terrifying Dragon King, but as Mr. Arcturus who makes bread. They gave him their artwork, and he did not know where to put it all. Walter found him that evening, carefully organizing the drawings by date. The old baker said nothing, just smiled. On the 6th day, someone invited him to a poetry reading at the community center. Arcturus had never attended a poetry reading, never thought about poetry at all, but he went and listened to ordinary people share their thoughts and feelings through verse. Some poems were good, some were terrible. Everyone applauded everyone else anyway, celebrating the courage to share rather than demanding perfection. On the 7th day, Walter took him to meet other people who had chosen change. The community center's meeting room held a dozen individuals from various species. They sat in a circle, cups of tea and coffee in hand. Walter made introductions. This was David, former soldier turned elementary teacher. This was Chris, who spent 20 years in prison for violent crimes and now counseled troubled youth. This was Rebecca, who overcame addiction and ran support groups for others fighting the same battle. Each person shared their story. Each had faced darkness and chosen light. Each had rebuilt their lives one small choice at a time. They spoke honestly about their struggles and failures, about backsliding and doubt and hard days when old habits called loudly. But they also spoke about redemption, about second chances, about communities that believed in transformation rather than permanent judgment, about humans who saw potential instead of only past mistakes. How do you trust them? Arcturus asked. How do you let a violent criminal work with children? How do you let an addict help others when they might fail again? Walter answered, Because we believe people can change. Because everyone deserves a chance to become better than they were. Because giving up on people guarantees they'll stay broken, but offering hope at least gives them a fighting chance. What if they fail? What if they hurt someone? Then we deal with that if it happens. But we don't punish people for crimes they might commit. We support them in choosing differently and hope for the best. Walter looked around the circle. Most people, given genuine support and real opportunities, will choose good over bad. Not always. Not perfectly. But most of the time. Chris spoke up. His voice was rough but sincere. I spent 2 decades being told I was garbage. That I'd never change. That I was just a violent thug who deserved whatever I got. You know what that does to someone? It makes you believe it. Makes you act like it's true because why fight it? What changed? Arcturus asked. A teacher visited the prison. She ran a reading program. Everyone said it was pointless, that criminals don't care about books. But she kept coming, week after week. She treated us like we mattered, like our thoughts and opinions had value. Chris smiled slightly. She was the first person in my adult life who saw me as human instead of a problem. Changed everything, Rebecca added. People become what you expect of them. Expect the worst, and that's what you'll get. Expect better, and some of them will rise to meet it. Not everyone, but enough. David nodded. I killed 17 people in combat. Did what I was ordered to do, but I still killed them. Came home and couldn't sleep. Couldn't function. Hated myself for what I'd done. He looked at Arcturus. Therapy helped. Community helped. But what really saved me was teaching kids. Giving them what I wish someone had given me. Showing them there are better ways to be strong than violence. Arcturus felt something cracking open inside him. These people understood. They had done terrible things and found ways to do better. They carried guilt and shame, but did not let it define them forever. They chose growth over stagnation, hope over despair, building over breaking. I have done worse than any of you, Arcturus said quietly. I have destroyed entire civilizations, enslaved species, ruled through fear for 3,000 years. How can anyone believe I can change after all that? Walter put a hand on Arcturus's forearm. Because you're here. Because you're trying. Because you spent a week learning to bake bread when you could have been conquering worlds. That matters. It does not erase what I have done. No, nothing erases the past. But you can't change yesterday. You can only choose what you do next. Walter squeezed gently. The question isn't whether you deserve redemption. The question is whether you'll choose it. Arcturus looked around the circle. Each person here had faced that same question. Each had chosen to try, to work, to build something better, even knowing they could never undo their mistakes. I want to choose it, Arcturus said, but I do not know if I'm strong enough. You conquered 73 worlds, Rebecca said. You're strong enough for anything. The question is whether you're brave enough. Brave enough for what? To be vulnerable. To admit you were wrong. To start over knowing people will judge you for your past. To keep choosing good even on days when it feels pointless. She smiled. Strength is easy. Courage is hard. Arcturus stayed in that circle for hours, listening to stories of transformation, of people who fell and got back up, of communities that caught them when they stumbled, of slow, difficult progress toward becoming better. When the meeting ended, Walter walked with him back to the bakery. The evening market was closing down. Vendors packed up their wares while children played in the last light of day. Ordinary life continuing its peaceful rhythm. Tomorrow the Galactic Council will demand my evaluation, Arcturus said. I cannot delay them longer. What will you tell them? The truth. That humanity is stronger than their technology suggests. That community is more powerful than weapons. That you have mastered something I never understood. Arcturus looked at the peaceful city around him. I will recommend full civilization status. And then I will resign my position as their enforcer. I will tell them I am staying here. Walter stopped walking. You're giving up your empire? I'm choosing something better. You asked what would make me happy. This makes me happy. Baking bread. Knowing people's names. Being part of something instead of ruling over it. Arcturus met Walter's eyes. I cannot undo 3,000 years of mistakes, but I can stop making new ones. The council won't like that. I do not care what they like. I have spent long enough doing what others expected. Time to do what I actually want. Walter smiled widely. Sounds like you're learning. I had a good teacher. They reached the bakery as the last light faded from the sky. Walter unlocked the door and pulled out a napkin. He wrote on it carefully, then handed it to Arcturus. The Dragon King read it and felt tears prick his ancient eyes. The message was simple. Welcome home. Tomorrow we teach you how to make croissants. Arcturus folded the napkin and placed it carefully in his apron pocket, next to Dorothy's soup recipe and the children's drawings. These simple things meant more to him than all his conquered worlds combined. Thank you, he said, for seeing something in me worth saving. Everyone's worth saving, Walter said. You just needed to see it in yourself. That night, Arcturus did not return to the governor's mansion. He slept in a small room above the bakery that Walter offered him. The bed was too small and the ceiling too low, but it was the first night in 3,000 years that Arcturus felt at home. Tomorrow he would face the council. Tomorrow he would choose his new path. Tomorrow he would begin the hard work of redemption. But tonight, he was just someone who belonged somewhere. Someone who had found community. Someone who was learning that strength meant building instead of breaking. The Dragon King closed his eyes and smiled. For the first time in 3 millennia, he felt genuinely happy. The Galactic Council arrived in person. 12 beings from 12 different species materialized in Meadowvale's government plaza, their holographic forms flickering with barely contained anger. Citizens gathered to watch, curious about the commotion. Arcturus met them wearing his flower-covered apron. He had been in the middle of a baking lesson when they appeared. His claws still had dough stuck under them. He did not apologize for making them wait. Explain yourself, the lead counselor demanded. You have been on this world for 2 weeks. You have ignored our communications. You have delayed your evaluation beyond all reasonable limits. What is the meaning of this? I have completed my evaluation, Arcturus said calmly. Humanity is ready for full civilization status. They possess strength that your standard measurements fail to capture. Strength? Their military is laughable. Their technology is primitive. Their defenses could not stop a minor raid. On what possible basis do you recommend advancement? Arcturus gestured to the crowd gathering around them. Humans of all ages. Families. Workers. Students. Ordinary people living extraordinary lives of quiet connection and purpose. They have mastered community, built societies that value cooperation over domination. They choose compassion even when cruelty would be easier. That requires more strength than you understand. This is unacceptable, another counselor snapped. You are making emotional judgments instead of tactical assessments. You have been compromised by prolonged exposure to these humans. I've been educated by them. There is a difference. You're the Dragon King. You do not get educated by lesser species. You conquer them. I was the Dragon King, Arcturus corrected. I resigned that position effective immediately. Shocked silence fell over the plaza. The counselors stared at him like he had spoken nonsense. Citizens whispered among themselves. Even Walter, watching from his bakery stall, looked surprised. You cannot resign, the lead counselor said. You have served the council for 3,000 years. You are our primary enforcer. You have responsibilities. I am done with responsibilities that require me to judge civilizations based on their capacity for violence. I am done building empires on fear. I am done being what you need me to be instead of who I want to be. And who do you want to be? Arcturus looked at Walter, who smiled encouragement. I want to be someone who builds instead of breaks. Someone who belongs somewhere. Someone who has friends instead of subjects. He turned back to the council. I'm staying on Meadowvale. Permanently. The counselors erupted in argument. They shouted about duty and honor and obligations. They threatened consequences. They demanded he reconsider. Arcturus listened to it all with calm patience he had learned from watching Walter handle difficult customers. When they finally ran out of words, Arcturus spoke. I have conquered 73 worlds for you. I have served for 3 millennia. I have been your weapon and your enforcer and your judge. I think I have earned the right to retire. You abandon everything you built, One counselor said. Your empire, your legacy, your power. For what? To bake bread in a marketplace. Yes, exactly that. Arcturus smiled. Because baking bread makes me happy. Because knowing my neighbors' names matters more than controlling star systems. Because I finally understand that the opposite of death is not survival. It is love. The council stood in stunned silence. They had no protocols for this situation. The Dragon King did not retire. The Dragon King did not choose peace over power. The Dragon King certainly did not quote philosophy learned from an elderly baker. This is not over, the lead counselor warned. We will return. We will discuss this properly. You know where to find me, Arcturus said. I will be at the bakery, learning croissants. The council's holographic forms flickered out, leaving the plaza in sudden quiet. Then someone started clapping, then another. Within moments, the entire gathered crowd applauded. Not because they fully understood what had happened, but because they recognized courage when they saw it. Arcturus returned to Walter's stall. The old baker handed him a cup of coffee and a fresh pastry. That was quite a speech. I have been practicing. I noticed. Very dramatic. The council looked properly shocked. Did I do the right thing? Walter considered the question seriously. Only you can answer that. But I'll say this. You look happier than you did 2 weeks ago. That counts for something. Arcturus bit into the pastry. It was still warm, sweet, and buttery. Simple pleasure that felt more valuable than any conquest. What happens now? Now you learn croissants like I promised. Then tomorrow we work on puff pastry. After that, maybe sourdough starters. Walter grinned. Unless you get bored of domestic life and want to go back to conquering galaxies. I think I am done with conquering. Good, because you're terrible at it anyway. Too much unnecessary drama. Arcturus laughed. Actually laughed. When was the last time he had laughed? He could not remember, but it felt good. Natural, right? The weeks turned into months. Arcturus settled into life on Meadowvale like he had always belonged there. He improved at baking. His croissants became popular. Children no longer ran from him but toward him, knowing he always had treats to share. Adults greeted him by name in the streets. Former enemies came to see if the rumors were true. Warriors from species he had conquered arrived, expecting a trap. They found the Dragon King teaching a mixed-species cooking class at the community center. They watched in disbelief as he patiently explained the difference between folding and kneading to a group of enthusiastic students. Some stayed. Some left shaking their heads. A few joined his classes. Arcturus opened his own stall next to Walter's. He specialized in fusion cuisine, combining dragon traditions with human techniques. His spicy flatbreads became famous across the sector. People traveled from other worlds just to try the bread made by the reformed Dragon King. He made mistakes. Some days he burned entire batches. Some days he snapped at customers when old habits surfaced. Some days he stood at his stall feeling the weight of 3,000 years of regrets pressing down on him. But Walter was always there. The old baker never judged, never reminded him of his past. Just offered quiet support and occasionally terrible jokes that somehow made everything feel lighter. A year after his arrival, a young dragon appeared in the marketplace. She landed with more force than necessary, cracking stones and scattering vendors. She looked around with fierce intensity until she spotted Arcturus behind his stall. "You are Arcturus," she said, "the conqueror of 73 worlds." "I was," Arcturus corrected. "Now, I am Arcturus the baker. Can I help you? I came to learn from the legendary Dragon King, to understand how you became so powerful." She looked around the simple marketplace with obvious confusion. "But you sell bread." "I do. Would you like to try some? I came for wisdom about conquest, not pastries." Arcturus wrapped up a honey bun, still warm from the oven. He handed it to the young dragon. "This is the wisdom I have to offer now. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop fighting." "That makes no sense." "It didn't to me either at first. Stay for a week. Help me bake. Talk to the people here. Then decide if you still want to learn conquest." Arcturus gestured to his stall. "I have a spare apron." The young dragon looked skeptical, but she saw something in Arcturus's eyes. some peace that had been absent from every other powerful being she had encountered. Something that looked like genuine happiness. 1 week, she said. 1 week, Arcturus agreed. Walter watched the exchange from his stall and smiled. He pulled out a napkin and wrote a new message, folding it carefully. He would give it to the young dragon when the time was right, when she was ready to understand that strength meant building instead of breaking. Months later, Arcturus stood in his bakery preparing for the morning rush. The young dragon, who now went by Sarah, worked beside him. She had stayed well past her 1 week, fascinated by these strange humans and their even stranger former conqueror. Walter approached with a cup of coffee. He was slower now, his age catching up with him, but his eyes still held that steady kindness that had seen past Arcturus's armor to the lonely being beneath. "I've been thinking about that first day you arrived," Walter said. "When you blocked my morning sun, I was insufferable. You were lost. There's a difference." Walter sipped his coffee. "You ever regret giving up your empire?" Arcturus looked around his bakery, at Sarah learning to shape dough, at the regular customers already lining up outside, at the community he had become part of instead of ruling over, at the life he had built with his own claws instead of taking from others. Not once, Arcturus said honestly, "This is better than any empire, even on the hard days, especially on the hard days, because on hard days, I have friends to help me through them. When I was the Dragon King, I had subjects who feared me and soldiers who obeyed me, but I had no one who cared if I was happy or sad or struggling." Walter smiled. "You're learning. I had a good teacher." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun rise over Meadowvale. The city was waking up, people starting their days, living their simple lives with quiet joy. A child approached the bakery, clutching coins in her small hand. "Mr. Arcturus, can I have my usual?" "Of course, little one." Arcturus carefully selected her favorite cinnamon roll and wrapped it gently. "Here you go." "Thank you." She skipped away, already eating the roll. Sarah watched the exchange with thoughtful eyes. "You really gave up everything for this?" "For making children smile." "I gave up nothing," Arcturus corrected. "I gained everything." He handed her a mixing bowl. "Come on. Morning rush starts soon, and we need to finish this batch." As they worked together, preparing bread that would feed their community, Arcturus thought about that first napkin Walter had given him. The message that changed everything. "You have conquered everything except your own loneliness." What if strength meant building instead of breaking? He had spent 3,000 years learning the wrong lessons. Learning that power came from fear and strength came from isolation. Learning that caring was weakness and mercy was foolishness. But Walter had taught him the truth. Real strength came from vulnerability. Real power came from connection. Real victory came from building something beautiful that outlasted you. The Dragon King had died the day Arcturus put on that apron. In his place stood someone better. Someone who knew his neighbors. Someone who made people smile. Someone who belonged. Arcturus pulled the old napkin from his pocket. He had kept it all this time, along with every other one Walter had written for him. His most valuable treasures. Simple paper with simple truths that had saved his life, that he read it once more, then carefully placed it back in his pocket, next to Dorothy's soup recipe and drawings from children and notes from friends. The life he had built, one small moment at a time. Outside, the market came alive with morning energy. Vendors called out greetings. Customers browsed the stalls. Children played in the fountain. Life continued its peaceful rhythm. And in a small bakery, a reformed Dragon King shaped dough with claws meant for destruction, creating something good instead. Building instead of breaking. Loving instead of conquering. Finally, after 3,000 years, he had come home.